Hello, I'm Brandon. I'm an alcoholic and addict in recovery, and today I want to talk about anger and resentment and why they can be such a big problem for people in recovery, for addicts and alcoholics, and why we have to pay a lot of special attention to these very strong emotions. So I'm going to read some from Living Sober about anger in general and anger specifically related to addiction and recovery. But there is also no denying that mayhem and even verbal assaults committed in excesses of anger are deplorable and do damage to society as a whole as well as to individuals. Therefore, many religions and philosophies urge us to get rid of anger in order to find a happier life. Yet a great number of people are certain that bottling up anger is very bad for emotional health, that we should get our hostility out in some way, or else it will poison our insides by turning inward toward ourselves, thus leading to deep depression. Anger in all its aspects is a universal human problem, but it poses a special threat to alcoholics. Our own anger can kill us. Recovered alcoholics and addicts almost unanimously agree that hostility, grudges, or resentments often make us want to drink, so we need to be vigilant against such feelings. We have found much more satisfying ways than drinking for dealing with them. So, anger and resentment is something that in our addictions, many of us held on to like they were treasures. I, in particular, can think of dozens of people who I held some kind of resentment or anger toward. And anger comes in many forms. The book lists out several different ways that you can have anger. For example, intolerance, contempt, envy, hatred, snobbishness, rigidity, cynicism, discontent, tension, sarcasm. That was a big one for me. Self-pity, malice, distrust, anxiety. Have you ever thought of anxiety as an expression of anger? Think about that. That's an interesting perspective. Suspicion, jealousy. These are all ways that we express anger emotionally. And a lot of people would argue, and the book goes on to talk about this, a lot of people would argue that all of those stem somehow from fear, which is why it's so important for us to explore not only how to deal with anger, but what are our fears in life? What are the fear? Because fear has such a powerful emotional drive for so many of us that it's worth taking time like we do during our step work. If you're an AA member, it's worth taking time to explore your fear, understand your fear, and really try to cope with that fear in a healthier manner. And I hesitate to say get over your fear, but in a lot of cases, that's what we want to do, because by removing the fear, we remove the tendency toward these anger and resentments that often can be problems for us when we're trying to, especially in early recovery, trying to get our feet under the ground. So I'm going to read a little bit more about resentments and anger. They say, even if we actually have been treated shabbily or unjustly, resentment is a luxury that as alcoholics we cannot afford. For us, all anger is self-destructive because it can lead back to drinking. And so this isn't a case where we're talking about, we need to get rid of the anger that doesn't make any sense or the resentments that aren't really justified. We're talking about all anger and resentment. The idea is to grow spiritually in a way where anger and resentments are not the same part of the daily course of our lives that they were when we were addicts. For a lot of us, anger and resentment drove a lot of our behavior and our emotional energy was dedicated to anger and resentment. We need to steer away from that in our recovery. We want to have a spiritual foundation that leads us to a place where those things are not a daily part of our lives, and where on a daily basis, when they do become part of our lives, we're taking a look at it and using it as a learning opportunity to grow rather than dwelling on that anger and resentment and using it as fuel for further drinking or for further anger and resentment. So we cannot, going back to the book, they say we cannot pretend to be experts at understanding depth psychology. So we have to concentrate at first not on searching for the causes of uncomfortable feelings of anger, but on coping with the feelings themselves, whether or not we think they are justified. We zero in on how to keep such feelings from fooling us into taking a drink. And they talk about different methods for dealing with anger. And the one that I want to bring up today, and this is a great section, lots of good stuff regarding exercise, contemplating the serenity prayer, pondering live and let live as an idea, and talking to other people. But the one idea that I like that has become really helpful for me is another effective remedy for anger is the as if idea. We decide how a mature, truly well balanced person would ideally handle a resentment like ours, then act as if we were that person. Have a go at it a few times. It works too. And so I used this idea a lot when I was, and still use this idea when I feel angry, when I have a resentment forming, and I think, okay, I need to talk to my sponsor, for example. A lot of times I can just imagine what he would tell me, and that's enough. That's enough of an imagination of what a mature, spiritually grounded person would do in this situation for me to see why I should steer away from anger and resentment, and how to handle this situation without those emotions in play. And it's a beautiful thing when that happens because it feels like growth. It feels good to be able to think of alternatives to your typical default settings just by imagining, what a different person might do. And that's very helpful. The other thing that's very helpful, one of my favorite exercises, if you've got a particularly strong anger or resentment that's bothering you, in the morning, write as yourself. Do a journal entry where you write about that anger or resentment or whatever it is that's bothering you, and then put it away for the day. And then at night, go back and respond to yourself as your higher power. And this is helpful not only for anger and resentments, but any kind of overall negative emotion you're having. If you're feeling a lot of shame about something, guilt about something, or you're feeling down on yourself, this is a good thing. And write back as a higher power that loves unconditionally, that cares for you. And if you have a hard time with the whole concept of a higher power, you can write as a loving parent would a child. And this gives you perspective, and it's powerful because the act of writing is involved. It clicks a lot of things in your brain that help you work through whatever problem it is that's bothering you. The last thing that they say is simply repressing, glossing over, or damming up anger rarely seems advisable. Instead, we try to learn not to act on it, but to do something about it. If we don't, we increase enormously our chances of drinking. So, anger and resentments are something that will happen. We're not going to get rid of our feelings of anger in life. But what we do about it. Hopefully, through some of the things that we practice, we will decrease how often we're angry and resentful, and then change what we do when those emotions do come up for us. Whether it's talking to other alcoholics or addicts, whether it's helping someone else, getting exercise, journaling, doing something that helps us cope with those emotions in a way that we never used to. We used to either drink so we could act on those, to get the courage to act on those emotions, bottle them up, which made them worse, which gave them time to fester and ferment. And so we have to find productive ways to deal with anger in recovery in order to prevent us from going back to the bottle or the pipe or whatever in order to handle it in our lives. So, really important for all of us in recovery to deal with anger and resentments. Really like this section. If you're looking for more ideas on how to deal with this kind of thing, this was pages 36 through 39 in Living Sober. They've got some good stuff in there. So, hope you have a great day, and I'll see you back here with more tomorrow.